Hello and welcome once again to Straight Bat, my weekly video blog where, as the title suggests, I play or comment with a straight bat. And this week, I'm commenting with a tinge of sadness and a fair measure of anger. The sadness comes out of grief. Like so many of you out there, I know of friends near and dear who have either suffered from COVID-19 or in some cases even succumbed to it. A former colleague of mine in her early 30s died only yesterday, and it is terribly tragic what's going on around us. Almost every night, all I do is try and get someone an oxygen bed, ICU bed, remdesivir, using whatever connections I have. And I can understand just how distraught people are moving from one hospital to another looking for a bed. That's where the sadness comes from. The anger, my friends, comes from the fact that somewhere one feels or fears that we could have done better, that it was avoidable, that the scrambling around at the last moment for oxygen supplies or drugs or vaccine shortages, could we have done better? Is this at one level not just a pandemic coming to us in waves, but also a consequence of our man-made follies? Did we make mistakes? And more importantly, who will be held accountable for them? I am angry because only a few days ago, I did a show where we were exposing the oxygen crisis in the country and the black marketing that was going on and the interstate disputes over oxygen supplies. And a BJP spokesperson on my show gets angry and says, I am running a horror show and you are exaggerating the crisis. And I felt like saying, horror show, sir? Is showing the reality a horror show in this country now? And then I told myself that perhaps this is the problem. That once you are in power, along with power comes the arrogance of power. And in this instance, I call it COVID hubris. If we, the citizens, are accused, and perhaps rightly so, of COVID complacency, of letting our guard down, well, then the governments of the day, at the state level and certainly at the center, will also have to take responsibility for what I call COVID hubris, for celebrating almost prematurely as if they had conquered COVID. Well, if you want to take credit, then you must also take responsibility. The buck must stop somewhere. And that, to my mind, my friends, must be done in a manner that goes beyond the usual political blame game. Because in the last 1 year, a hyper-polarized and an over-politicized society has expended far too much political capital and distracted itself from the COVID gaze by constantly engaging in political wrangling, in trying to bring down governments, be it in Rajasthan or more successfully in Madhya Pradesh, be it in wanting to win an election at all costs, as seems to be the approach in Bengal, or indeed opening up fresh friction points by bringing a farm legislation that you knew was contentious and eventually brought several farmers out on the street and led to a winter of discontent. Was all of that really necessary? Could we, for example, not have seen all our political parties, as the COVID cases started to rise, go to the Election Commission and say, look, we do not want an elongated poll schedule. We want a shorter, truncated poll schedule. Or we will use our digital footprint to reach out to the voters online. Instead, what do we find? All political parties, and certainly the two main contenders in Bengal, the Trinamool Congress and the BJP, doing even larger rallies. And look at the optics. On a day when cases in the country crossed 2 lakhs for the first time, the Prime Minister was in Asansol, excited by the size of the crowd and exhorting people to come in even larger numbers. Most of them without masks and with no social distancing. I mean, leadership is about being a step ahead, not joining the multitude. I'm not saying that the Prime Minister shouldn't campaign in Bengal. That would be like saying Virat Kohli shouldn't be in the World Test Championship final. But you need to be seen to be responsible. It's no point saying do gaz ki duri to the citizens and then not maintaining it yourself in your political rallies. To my mind, this is a time for consensus building. This is a time when, far from political blame games, you involve the best minds and build a special COVID task force where the finest minds work together in complete harmony. That hasn't happened, my friends. And the consequences of that are there to see. Let's be clear. When a Rahul Gandhi makes comments on or suggests that we need to bring in foreign vaccines into the country, he's accused of lobbying. 2 or 3 days later, the government accepts that very suggestion. Former Prime Minister Dr. Manmohan Singh writes a letter to the Prime Minister. We have Harsh Vardhan, otherwise a decent and gentleman, sending a very rather angry letter, almost suggesting as if Dr. Singh knows nothing. That same evening, most of the recommendations are accepted. You have a slanging match on Twitter where Uddhav Thackeray first claims that the Prime Minister was uncontactable when Maharashtra needed oxygen and remdesivir supplies. And what's the response that he gets? Piyush Goyal goes on Twitter and attacks him, calls him corrupt and inept. I mean, surely there could have been a hotline between Delhi and Mumbai for crisis management that could resolve this issue. Surely, as the vaccine policy itself has shown, there was a need to involve expert advice at all stage because you have a disjointed policy. I mean, you should have had firm supply orders in place in December itself. Instead of celebrating as if we were going to conquer coronavirus, we should have been ready to ramp up production, to build more flexibility into the system, to incentivize private manufacturers. And this is not me saying it. The likes of Azim Premji, well respected, believes that India could easily meet all its needs. Just get in a stronger public-private partnership in place. Now, if the state knows best, Sarkar sab janti hai, then if you are the only wise man or the wise collective, then how are you going to actually conquer a complex challenge like coronavirus? This is not about optics, about images, about sound bites. This is about hard science, about data, about genome sequencing, about issues that need the best minds to be put together to work on this. And that hasn't happened. With the result on vaccine policy, for example, we have a bizarre situation where for a while, till the end of March, we were exporting more vaccines than had been administered to Indian citizens. And now we are in a situation where, faced with vaccine shortages, we are desperately trying to import the vaccines. I think the time has come to really ask ourselves what kind of a political leadership is needed in a crisis situation. There are moments when politics takes over our lives, like in elections. But a public health emergency demands a different kind of leadership, much more rational, much more inclusive, much more communicative in a manner that gives people confidence of meeting this challenge. This is not an easy challenge. And I don't think it would be fair to blame an individual. The opposition will suggest that all of this is because of Mr. Modi. I think that would be unfair. Let's be very clear. A pandemic knows no political boundaries. Congress-ruled states like Chhattisgarh or an opposition-ruled state like Maharashtra, or indeed BJP-ruled states like UP, MP and the Prime Minister's home state of Gujarat have all suffered. It's not easy in a large, densely populated country like India to conquer coronavirus and a pandemic. But a little bit of humility, a little bit of acceptance of mistakes, of taking responsibility and course correcting in a consensual manner, in a transparent manner, would be perhaps the better way forward. And let me just leave you with one final thought about that. The Prime Minister's Cares Fund, large amounts of money which have been given for COVID-19. Our correspondents and many others I know have been putting RTI after RTI asking, where has the money gone? How many ventilators have you bought? How many oxygen plants have been set up? How many ICU beds? How many new facilities for COVID care? Each time the answer is PM Care Fund is not a public body, and therefore no answers are given. We need to be more transparent with our people. We need to involve people. This has to be a collective exercise. Don't make it center versus state or pass the buck onto a state government. Take responsibility and course correct. I wish our leaders well. Lots of good health to all of you out there. Each and every Indian citizen, Aam Aadmi or Khas Aadmi. Stay well, stay safe, adopt COVID appropriate behavior. Thanks for watching, and do subscribe to my YouTube channel for more such videos. Namaskar.